Soothsayers. They can be found at every station, in the subway and in general anywhere. All my life I avoided them, but one day, foolishly, I decided to eat the forbidden fruit and use this service, which I now bitterly regret. This decision ruined my life. Not only did I let that damn soothsayer in, I also drank. If I hadn't been a complete fool, nothing bad would have happened. My name is Vitaly and this is my story. It all started on my daughter's birthday. We decided to celebrate it at the dacha, since it was summer outside, and it was a sin not to spend this wonderful week outdoors under the bright sun. We decorated the yard with inflatable balloons and colorful inscriptions with congratulations. We covered the yard table, which I myself once made from a log, with a burgundy velvet tablecloth, and put a glass ball in the center. We wanted to create the illusion of magic, so that our little Vera, at least on her birthday, would feel like a fabulous, fragile fairy. Vera at that time was with her grandmother and friend Petya at the zoo, and my wife Masha and I patiently waited for her return. We remembered that we forgot to buy lemonade, and Masha went to the village store, while I stayed in the yard. The store was quite far from home, and therefore it was planned for at least 40 minutes of being alone. I was sitting and basking in the sun, when a gypsy came up to the gate and asked if I wanted her to tell me fortune. She was dressed in a colorful skirt, gold earrings hung in her ears. Her fingers were decorated with many earrings, and massive glass beads shone around her neck in the sunlight. I laughed in my heart at her, but I was terribly bored, and as a joke, I agreed. The gypsy went to the glass ball on the table and began to peer into it. I could hardly restrain myself from laughing. With what zeal she peered into a fake piece of glass, bought in the first souvenir shop that came across. "Honey, I know you're bored. The wife and child will not return soon, but you really want to open the cognac that is in your closet," said the gypsy. At first I was wary, because we really had cognac prepared, and I really wanted to drink it. But then I wrote it off as a coincidence. The gypsy could easily guess from the scenery that we were planning a holiday. I need to lay out the cards. I don't see anything else in the crystal ball," said the fortune teller. She pulled a tarot card bag, stained and torn in places, from her pocket and laid it out on the burgundy tablecloth. I snorted quite loudly and rolled my eyes with a smile. "What's wrong with you?" she asked me. "Nothing special. It's just bullshit," I replied. "What do you mean by that?" "Yes, the fact that all this magic, cards and other crap is a delusional scam for a sucker. Magic wands made of plastic, magic dust and other tinsel will fit only for the entertainment of children. No one will believe this nonsense," I said, pointing to the cards and the glass ball. The gypsy somehow angrily threw the package of cards on the table and grabbed the ball with her crooked fingers. Any normal owner of the house would have kicked her out a long time ago, but it was funny to me, and I wanted to troll her more. But in vain. Do not believe. You can't even imagine how many things happen in this world beyond human understanding. With these words she continued to peer into the ball, and I looked at this eccentric. By and large, this meeting with the gypsy should not have happened at all. The fact is that my daughter Vika liked her classmate Petya, with whom they were friends. The problem was that Petya's mother was turned to religion. When we told her that we were going to decorate the holiday in the style of magic, she objected, saying that she will not allow her son to participate in satanic rites. I myself was not happy to see this crazy woman in my house, but Vika said that she would not celebrate without Petya. Together, we agreed that Vika and Petya and our grandmother would go to the zoo, after which she would bring Vika home, and we would celebrate without Petya. Petya's mother was not embarrassed by animals in cramped cages, but a couple of plastic toys are already a satanic rite. Anyway, the gypsy stood in front of me and peered into the ball. Then she looked at me and, without taking her eyes off me, began to shuffle the tarot cards in her hands. "Do you believe in anything at all?" asked the gypsy. "In terms of," I clarified. "In karma, for example." "No. Listen, Let me pay you and you will leave. I have a lot to do. In fact, I had no business. This gypsy just tired me. I wanted to break up with her peacefully and spend a couple of minutes in the company of a 5-star cognac. My wife, God forbid, was halfway to the store. If there is a queue, then it will not return very soon, but I missed it. Well, she answered, without ceasing to shuffle the cards, after which she brushed invisible dust from the glass ball. I realized that she was not going to leave. My mind gave me a magic slap on the back of the head, and it dawned on me that she was about to start cheating me out of money. I could not stand it and decided to send her out. You know what? I asked you to leave. I offered you money, and you are still here. I'm not interested in what you have to offer, and I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Here, take the money and get out of here with your damn cards, I said, throwing 400 rubles on the table. For a second, the gypsy froze, looked at me appraisingly, and then said, "Can I show you something? What you call magic? If you don't like it, I'll leave and won't take a penny from you." "Okay, let's do it," I replied. By that time, she had worn me out to a great extent, and I jumped at the only opportunity to get rid of her. Pretty spoiling my mood, I wanted to call the police, but I remembered that I was sitting in the middle of nowhere, and it would take a long time to come to me. I managed to curse myself 1,000 times for letting this ant into the yard, and then I made a fatal mistake. I went for cognac. I entered the house, opened the cupboard, poured myself a glass of cognac, and swore an oath not to drink more than 1 glass. Then he returned and stood next to the gypsy. The amber-fragrant liquid in the glass calmed me, and I continued to watch the fortune teller. The gypsy again began to shuffle the tarot cards, after which she said, "You really don't believe in the supernatural? You know, every person deep down, at least a little, but believes in something mysterious." With these words, she spread her arms in the air. "What are you speaking about?" I asked. "Yes, nothing," the gypsy replied with a fox-like smile. "By the way, you said that if you can't convince me of the existence of magic, you'll just leave. But what if you can still convince?" I asked, taking a sip and wincing. Some kind of chymosa, like a powder or dishwashing detergent, was mixed with the tart taste of cognac. "So, do you still have doubts?" No. I just want to clarify what will happen. If I can convince you that there are things beyond this world, I'll just take your money and leave. I'm offering a modest amount. What do you actually get out of it?" I said, sitting on a chair made from a stump. Feeling of self-satisfaction. I had no desire to argue with her, I just wanted to enjoy a fine drink. The gypsy collected the cards, and there was nothing left on the table but a glass ball. She took my hand and put it on the ball. The glass in front of me looked more like a lantern than a portal to another world. By that time the cognac had gone to my head, and I had little idea of what I was doing. In the next second, I was surprised. The empty ball inside was filled with dark gray smoke. The gypsy squeezed my hand tighter, and I noticed how something twitched in the thick veil. The gypsy spoke in a hushed voice. "It's not the first time you feel how they look at you, how they watch you. You may have dismissed this fleeting obsession, attributing it to your rich imagination, but no. Let me tell you, it was not imagination at all. You knew perfectly well that there was no simple explanation for this, but you tried desperately to convince yourself otherwise, to pretend that you just imagined it." For a second, the gypsy squeezed my hand, and then said, "You shouldn't have believed me. Now look what you have condemned yourself to." From the dark veil inside the ball, milky white eyes looked at me. The eyes began to grow, and it seemed to me that they were about to tear the ball from the inside. Those eyes stared at me, and a terrible memory shot through my head like an arrow. In my obsession, I was a 3-year-old child and lay alone at night in a room in my crib. Its wooden bars were too high for me, and I saw how they hung over me. And then in the darkness I saw black shapeless beings that were created as if from the shadows themselves. They looked at me with huge milky white eyes. The same ones I saw in the ball. The creatures stared at me, their shadowy bodies swaying in the cool breeze that came from the open window. Although these creatures simply stood still, I understood that they were evil. I screamed. My screams continued until my mother ran into the room and turned on the light. She took me in her arms, hugged me to her chest and said that there was no one in the darkness, and I had nothing to be afraid of. But I knew that those creatures were real. You were deceived, the gypsy continued. You were told that it was imagination, that there was no one in the dark, and you yourself believed it. Deep down in your heart, you know perfectly well that this is no fiction, but you continue to feed yourself with convenient lies. Of course, it is easier to convince yourself that monsters do not exist than to accept the terrible reality. Accept that there is no escape from them. The hands of the gypsy crawled to my wrists like spiders, and through the ball I saw her face in front of me. It wavered and trembled in the mist, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. Then a second memory came to me. I was 6. My sister and I went for a walk in the forest next to my grandfather's hut. After half an hour of wandering, we came across an old drain pipe in the hill. She lay horizontally and went somewhere deep into the hill. We looked inside. There was total darkness. The pipe turned out to be quite large. My sister offered to climb into it and see where it leads. I refused. I just couldn't bring myself to crawl into that rusty black mouth. My sister said I was a coward. It hurt me, and I decided to climb inside the pipe anyway. I got down on all fours, looked into the darkness and was stunned. Those huge eyes stared back at me. They stared at me without blinking, and for a moment it seemed to me that they were approaching me. I yelled, jumped up from the ground and ran to my grandfather's hut, leaving my dumbfounded sister at the hill. And again, I tried to convince myself that it was just imagination. Year after year, I told myself lies that there were no monsters, and in doing so, I adjusted the world in the way that was convenient for me. I screamed and opened my eyes. The soothsayer was not by my side. I sat at the table and stared at the glass ball. The broken glass lay beneath me. I looked around and realized that it was already beginning to get light. Realizing that my wife never returned, I frantically reached into my pocket for the phone and was horrified to find 30 missed calls from her. When I called her back, she hysterically blurted out to me that after a walk around the zoo, grandmother and Vika sent Petya to her mother, then boarded a minibus to the dacha village. At one of the turns, the driver lost control and flew into a ditch. Grandmother remained intact, but Vika was seriously injured. My wife told me to urgently go to the hospital to see my daughter. I took off and asked a neighbor to take me to the city for money. Vika survived, but she will be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. It's been 3 months since then and I forgot the story about this gypsy and the monsters from my memories. Everything was relatively good until yesterday. On another gray morning on my way to work, I decided to check my mailbox. Inside was only a piece of paper. I already thought that this was another advertisement for some crap, but it turned out to be an ordinary notebook sheet in a cage. I took the treasured piece. It had only one word written on it. When I read it, my dream, as if removed by hand, I decided to go home and take time off from work. I knew that after reading this I would simply not be able to perform my duties normally. It was written on the sheet. Now do you believe in the other world?